Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank LiveCall for inviting me to speak today. So, just a little bit about me, or more specifically about the 5-letter acronym for which I work, the Australian Institute of Food Science and Technology. We are a not-for-profit membership organisation, and we represent food professionals in Australia. We are Australia's only independent network and voice for food industry professionals. And our vision is all around advancing Australia's position as a sustainable and world-leading food industry. And we do this by providing a number of services. We provide services to our members in the way of skill and capability building and advocacy for the profession. We also provide services to the industry, and that's my main job, is to provide industry services around consultation and events such as these. So if you're interested, please do get online and join STAT. All right, let me talk a little bit now around insights. So insights is a poor old word, because insights gets bandied around a fair bit without really many people understanding what it means. And it means inward looking, so it's things that are not immediately obvious just by looking at something at face value. And moreover, many people believe that insights are just obtained from data, or data by itself. And that's the very rational, quantitative part of insight, and you can get some great insights from looking at data, from supply chains, market evaluations, retail figures, and certainly scientific data. And that's the what. But you get real potency and real value when you also combine that with the human element. So it's great to know what's going on, but it's even better to understand why. So having social intelligence and really having a good understanding of the human condition is critical in understanding the why, the social and emotional part of insights. So the balance there between the heart and the mind. And I might add, it's no coincidence that many people who work in insights and data and qualitative work have a background in psychology. It's a fundamental part of insights generation. All right, let's talk about fat and fatty foods. Who likes fatty foods like hot chips? And everyone else is lying. Yep. We all love hot chips. We all love it. And what's the reason that we love hot chips? Because there's some real advantages in terms of survival if you enjoy fat. Fat is a very efficient way to get energy. Fat has twice the energy content of protein and carbohydrate and is a really important vehicle for our fat-soluble vitamins. So in that way, survival advantage is gained through being able to eat fat. Also, marbling of fat in meat makes meat more palatable, so you can access all of the other protein and vitamins that comes through meat. So we've been walking around for about 200,000 years on this planet, and starvation has always been more of an issue than overeating, okay? So that is one of the reasons why we love fat. So if you're like me and you can put on a kilo just by looking at a cream cake, then you need to think of yourself as being evolutionary superior, because survival will always trump fashion. Thank you. What's the most popular ice cream flavour in the world? That's a hint, by the way. I'll ask again. What's the most popular ice cream flavour in the world? Could you guess? Vanilla, yeah, that's right, and it is across every nation, every country, and every culture. Do you know why this is? Because vanilla is the flavour of breast milk. Vanilla is the flavour of breast milk, and flavours and aromas that we feel when we're very young absolutely trigger these important memories, and so we continue those things. So there's two examples, two anthropological survival reasons why we make the choices that we do, why we enjoy the things that we do. So that's based on survival, but food is also very emotional, more than we think. So on the weekend, I decided to sit down and see if I could make a list of words that describe our relationship with food and how food is significant to us as humans. And it wasn't very hard to generate about 50 words. Food is a life giver, and also food can be a killer. Food is absolutely socially defining as well as providing sustenance. It can be a poison as much as it can be a medicine. It's a symbol, it has divinity in religion, for example, but it's also sinful in other ways. So the point about this is our relationship with food is complex on many levels, which is why it is just so interesting to understand insights about our food choice and consumption. All right, I'm going to show a TVC now, and we're going to discuss afterwards some of the insights that have been used to generate this piece of advertising.
Mate, 4 carton drafts, thanks. Sure.
Just a moment.
It's time to get it on. Watch out now. Slam those balls. That's some tasty magic, baby. I'm about to blow your mind. That's not even physically possible. Australia, a keg of Carlton Draft is changed every 46 seconds. Carlton Draft, it's that fresh, baby.
Okay, who drinks Carlton Draft? No, yeah, okay, great. Me too. All right. So, what are the insights here? The insights here are around freshness. Now, if you drink beer at all or are interested in the beer market, you'll know there's been a rise in craft beers in the last probably 5 years in particular. And craft beers, whilst they're quite popular for a number of different reasons, certainly have some limitations in terms of flavour delivery. Craft beers are not pasteurised, which means they don't undergo thermal processing. That means that there's residual yeast which continues to ferment, so it kind of develops or gets cellared, if you like, a little bit like wine. The great thing about keg beer is it is pasteurised, and not only that, it's stored in containers that block the light and also is transported and managed in a way that controls the temperature. Whereas craft beer's in glass, because of this instability through no thermal processing, and also it's transported in glass and is usually open to temperature abuse depending on how it's stored, doesn't deliver the fresh flavours that keg beer does. So the draft beers have observed this and have just quietly gone about messaging freshness and flavour delivery around keg beer compared with craft beer. So that's important in terms of an insight. The other insight is every 46 seconds, a keg gets changed. But there's a little bit more than that. And that is, it's a bit of an FU at the somewhat wanky hipster who is really the poster child for these sorts of craft beers. So the blokes that you saw in that TVC were kind of daggy looking. They certainly weren't ripped. They didn't have their shirts off or have lots of ink up their arms. Some of them even had hairy shoulders, I think, which is not very hipster. So I think the messaging around that is the inside emotionally saying it's all right to be a regular bloke, there's some good advantages to drinking keg beer. So it's a bit anti-craft in that way. And might I also suggest that things like craft beer, which trades very much on authenticity and as an alternative, gets to be tempered a little bit, and this happens in trends, when they end up in the mainstream. So when your edgy, premium, trendy idea ends up in a frozen pie, that somewhat signals the end of the specialness of that trend. Okay, so that's insights. But when we look at insights and when we look at consumers and when we do market research, or just look at figures in general, we love talking about the average and quoting the mean, but the mean can be very misleading. So we're going to do a little bit of arithmetic here. Don't worry, it's not even mathematics, it's arithmetic. Just throw a question out to this lively audience. How many people live in Australia, roughly? 24 million, we'll say, round number. Okay, so how many males are there living in Australia then? About 12, like divide 24 by 2, just roughly, so 12 million males. So then how many testicles are there in Australia? About 24 million, right? 24 million testicles, human testicles. So then do a quick mean calculation. What's the average number of testicles per person living in Australia? What? That's right, Michael Finucane. He gave me the one. You're good at arithmetic. Now, is that right? Is that a useful number? Not really. It's not. So we sort of try and avoid the means a bit in market research and certainly in insights. And we like to do what is called segmentation of our market. And segmentation is a really powerful tool. It uses a number of different techniques. It uses the human element as well as the data element. And the potency and the power around segmentation is that it can identify key groups of consumers or groups within your market. It will define them by a number of elements that they have in common. And there's a number of ways that you can look at that. And so that helps business or an organisation get very clear on its target market, to prioritise it, to value the opportunity, and then ensure that the right resources and activities are deployed to target that particular group for the best success. Now, there's a number of ways you can segment your market depending on what it is you're doing. You can segment them geographically. So you can talk about cities, and you can talk about states, and you can talk about regions. You can also split or segment demographically. So you can look at age, you can look at gender, you can look at socioeconomic status, etc. Another way of segmenting, and this is done by a lot of food companies, many companies actually, is psychographic. So this is all about values, attitudes to things, the way you think about things, personality types, political beliefs, all of those kinds of things. And the other way of segmenting is around behaviour. And that's usually around shopper behaviour, retail likes and dislikes, level of planning, the kinds of occasions we're looking to buy for. So by way of example, I have an example here of an Aldi segmentation. And Aldi are killing it in Australia. They're doing extremely well. So on the left-hand side there you can see a bar chart, which were the original segments of Aldi shoppers that they targeted. But in more recent times, they've shifted their target, and you can see then that the proportions have changed. So they've reduced their focus on budget-conscious couples, which is the second one from the bottom there, and understood that the family-focused and the mainstreamers are a real source of business for them. So, four-person households seeking deals and scans weekly ads and want to get in and out of stores quickly. That's the family focus. Whereas the mainstreamers are low-maintenance urban shoppers, neutral on store brands, and like clean, organised stores. That's the focus for Aldi, and it's paying off for them because they can generate their activities and mobilise their resources specifically around that. And this is a very powerful way of looking at your market. And sometimes organisations might do segmentations and even decide to ignore particular segments altogether because it's simply not within their remit. I'd like to talk about an example of insights, which I think is certainly relevant for anyone doing business in Australia and outside of Australia, is the diaspora in Australia. So Australia's immigrant population. Now, I think people think they might know what's going on with different immigrant groups in Australia, but recent data from the census is showing us what's going on and some of the opportunities that have arisen there. So for example, in Sydney, 55% of Sydney come from a non-English speaking background. Chinese are more prevalent in Sydney, and that is growing at 7% per annum. Meanwhile, in Melbourne, they're 49% of a non-English speaking background, and the Indians in Melbourne are growing at 11% per annum. It's interesting talking about South Asia before. One of the fastest movers in terms of sectors or growing community in Australia are the South Asian community. So they're growing at 62% off a pretty respectable base. Meanwhile, Nepal is the fastest growing country of ancestry in Australia, and it's increased 136% since last census. Now, in that picture there, you can see two fellas, and they make my coffee every morning at Ground Espresso in North Sydney. That's Bibi and Sumit, and they are both from Kathmandu. Another interesting analysis of migrants in Australia, and even if you're in the cheap seats down the back, you can see that there's a shift in terms of where immigrants are born according to age. So the blue lines there are Asian born, the green ones are European born. So there's a very strong group and pretty good representation of Asian born people in Australia between the ages of 20 and 44. Meanwhile, our European-born Australians are certainly getting older, and there aren't too many that are new. And the message that I would take for this is around businesses mirroring their consumers. And businesses that don't mirror their consumers will always lose to a competitor who does, okay? So we often see things in the newspaper around diversity. Are we adequately diverse enough in our organisations, in our agencies to reflect the country that we are, but also the market that we're trying to service? And this has as much value for markets overseas as it does even for in Australia, because many of these groups, Asian immigrants living in Australia, do not feel adequately serviced by the kinds of products we give them, like Maggi noodles, for example. Really doesn't cut it. Are we using enough of our homegrown or living here Australians born in Asian countries with their cultural sensitivities and their cultural knowledge? Are we using them properly as Australians to help us generate business here and overseas? And you can see here we have adequate representation in these groups. I asked my neighbour the other day a question about Indians and Indians. What sort of cars do you think they like driving? And he said, I think they like driving Mercedes. Now, I got this data not very long ago, and you can't even ask that question, what do Indians like to drive? Because here's some data split by Hindi, Punjabi and Tamil, so distinct groups within the country that is India, and the kinds of cars that they like to drive, what their choices are. So understanding that segmentation is as useful as understanding any other kind. So when we do that, are we really examining the nuances of our particular target market? And we've experienced it here in Australia. So Starbucks, which is on the corner of every street in Manhattan, came to Australia in the early 2000s. They opened about 90 stores. By 2006, they only had 20 opened in Australia, and they lost a total of around $200 million off their books because of the failure here. What do you think the reason was? The reason was Australians are coffee snobs. We like our coffee at the local cafe, and we like it Italian style. WTF, what the Frappuccino? Are you for real? We don't drink hot milkshakes. Yeah, you can put a flat white on the menu or a cappuccino, but fundamentally, this is not our kind of coffee shop. Similarly, in the early 2000s, and I was actually commissioned to do this work, Taco Bell came to Australia. And the group that owns Taco Bell also owns Pizza Hut and KFC. It's seen great success with those two QSR chains. Let's roll out Taco Bell in about 2001. So we did a number of pieces of consumer research and it was lukewarm at best. But the organisation really wanted to push it. If it works in the United States, it'll work here. I think within 12 months, all of the stores were closed. About 12 years later, we have other offerings, Mexican-style food that are going gangbusters, like Tex-Mex, for example. But these offerings are fresh and authentic, and the timing was right. So if you don't have data, if you don't have insights and understanding, and worse, you fail to take note, even if you do have them, you fail to take notice of them, then you probably deserve everything you get into that business decision. So cultural sensitivity and understanding the market that you're going to sell your food cannot be underestimated. And you might be familiar with this campaign in the United States, Got Milk. It's been going for a very long time, most successful, and there's Harrison Ford there doing his bit for the Got Milk campaign. And because that was so unreal and going gangbusters in the US, they thought, let's roll it out to Mexico, because they'll really like it too. The trouble is, when you directly translate Got Milk into Spanish, it's, are you lactating? So can you guess why that didn't go too well? Okay. I'm going to talk lastly about insights around the ageing population. And we certainly know that there are some benefits in having a very experienced and healthy ageing population in Australia. There's a great deal of mentoring to draw from, a great deal of wisdom. However, in this growth of our ageing population, which is significant and is predicted to be 22% of the world population over 65 by 2050, and in better health than they are now, and certainly longer lifespans. So by 2050, men are expected to live to 88 and women 90. But there's also lifestyle-related illnesses that come along with that, health costs, cancer, what have you. And certainly at IFOST, which is an international research organisation, older consumers over 65 represent the single fastest growing demographic. So there are some facts that we understand. So some insights that we know physiologically about the ageing population and food. So for example, with age comes generally a drop in appetite. Okay, so we don't feel as hungry, and the signals between our brain and our stomach don't work as well either. So we eat smaller amounts of food. So we need to be very cognizant of that with this growing population. If we're eating smaller amounts of food, it needs to have better nutritional quality. Okay, it needs to have potency and intensity in terms of its nutrients, and there are specific nutrients that we require, all of us, as we age. The other really important thing, which many companies don't do very well, is adequate packaging. So number one, packaging you can use and packaging which you can read. So this is real packaging from Hong Kong. Looks handy and easy to use, doesn't it, for your tin of Coke? The other thing we understand about our ageing population, especially one of the groups that are growing at the moment in the over 85s, is this concept of food waste. And it's very emotional for many people in certain age groups because it's associated very strongly with rationing and the war and World War II. And this is a piece of communication from World War II in the UK, waste the food and help the Hun. So there was a very strong campaign around reducing food wastage in the home. So you cannot demonstrate to older consumers any kind of waste. It's quite an emotional issue. So this organisation in the United States called Thrive, they make ice cream. What the position they take, because I don't know many people who are ageing who really enjoy being reminded of this and also enjoy being reminded of all their shortcomings and issues that I've just described. In fact, there was some data not long ago around communication advice with the ageing population that you should always say, this is suitable for ageing people, that is someone 15 years older than you. 15 years is about the number that most older people feel is old. Even if you're 65, it's like, well, really 80, that's a bit older. 80, oh, well, 95, that's what you're talking about there. So Thrive, who a fantastic company in the US, understand that, getting adequate nutrition as we age is a challenge. We don't need as many calories to function, we eat less. So this is a special, very palatable kind of ice cream that has fibre, folate, B12, all of these things that are important for healthy bones and sharp minds and healthy hearts. But the packaging is not obviously old person's food, okay? It's quite a premium product and positioned that way. Real ice cream, real benefits. So this is what we call positive nutrition. But not that many food companies are looking at their ageing population or are looking at the strategies around that. But I did want to show you a TVC from Gillette. So this isn't food, it's razors. But they've done an outstanding job with innovation, but also messaging with this particular TVC.
Good morning, sir. Ready to get up? Let me get your feet up. How you doing today? Okay. Good morning.
I remember always looking at my dad's arms like when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old. He had arms like Popeye. He was a tugboat captain, and I so admired his physique. And now it's a different story, you know? And that's just the way it is. So my dad had a stroke, and now he can't get around, he can't walk. And he needs me to help him out. And my son Luke and I have been doing it. And I'd do anything for him.
I can give you a really good mohawk. You look like a punk rocker.
There's a definite role reversal that happens. I have to wake him up in the morning and take care of him and groom him and shave him and shower him. It's actually an honor to do that for your father because he did it for me when I was a kid. My dad's got the greatest face. His squishy face is just amazing. He's sort of thin-skinned and I don't want to cut it at all. So I got to be careful with that face. Like he'll just say, do this, do that. You got to make sure that you shave my neck down. You got to do my lips up. You know, he was really particular about his sideburns.
That's where your sideburns start? Okay. I'm not going to touch your sideburns.
Okay, good.
Okay? How am I doing so far, Dad?
Okay.
You know, it takes me like a half an hour to shave my father because I have to be so careful.
Can't live without it either.
Okay, I will. Oh, there we go. Okay, good. I love that face. Hi.
I'm one of the lucky ones. A lot of my friends my age do not have their dads, and I still have my dad. He always says to me, he looks up at me after I pour love on him for the whole day, and he says, I don't know what I did to deserve you. And I say, Dad, I got you. I got you, Dad.
All got your hankies? Beautiful piece of production, really well managed, and so many insights. So insights around dignity, but insights around care. And I think they've just done such a wonderful job of capturing all of those emotional values and emotional connections with their customer, but also a very practical one too. Shaving, assisted shaving, which, you know, it will obviously grow. So we're going to change pace a little bit now. Another TVC, another set of insights and another product. Again, not food, but maybe something you didn't know so much about our ageing population.
You might think the life of senior citizens is more or less like this, but in reality, it's a bit more like this.
Click, clap, pull it. Go ahead and do it. Kiss me up, bang, bang. Kiss me up, bang, bang. Let's go!
You may think their sex lives are something like this. Actually, it's closer to this.
Yep, I'm a bitch. If you don't like it, give my ass a kiss. Just one thing I can't seem to get. If it's a man's world, then where's my...
And maybe you think that because of their age, safe sex isn't something they need to worry about. But if you think seniors aren't an easy target for STDs, think again.
Fucking with me is like Russian roulette with 6 bullets.
If we have these kinds of misconceptions, it's normal that seniors also have them as well. Hi, I'm Nina Hartley, and you might remember me from such films as Wild Wild Chest or the award-winning Boogie Nights. But today, I'm here to tell you that STDs have spread alarmingly among people over 65. That's why, in collaboration with Pornhub Cares, I've created Nina Hartley's Old School, a complete video guide to safe and good sex in your golden years. Check out the full video online or order your VHS on our website. Because love knows no age, but neither do STDs.
Okay, so that's the first time I've showed anything remotely pornographically related at a conference. Might not be the last time either. So the insight around this, obviously, is ageing population and sexual activity. And our sexual function is actually one of the last things to go. So with all that bad food news, there is a little bit of good news about ageing. However, the use of contraception is always linked with exactly that, avoiding pregnancy or family planning. So STDs have skyrocketed, chlamydia, syphilis, and more worryingly, AIDS amongst the senior population. So I think they've done a fantastic job from a health point of view. We know that also older people have weaker immune systems, so it can be quite deadly. So that is a very nice touch, I think, to also release it on VHS, even though my parents thought Betamax was here to stay. That's a joke. That's a tough crowd. Okay. Don't worry, I've nearly finished. So, takeaways. So, the main points I want to make here are insights exist on different levels and very rarely exist alone. Even within our segmentation, there's overlaps. They're often interrelated and not always sharply separated. Our decisions, every one of our decisions, are as emotional as they are rational, whether we realise it or not. Well-developed insights reveal the problem to be solved or the unmet need, and that is how we create opportunity to improve our services or to innovate. The mean is misleading. Remember the testicles? Business people always need to segment the market, any type, in order to customise strategies and ensure that we're meeting the needs of our consumers. High-value segments can be prioritised and adequately engaged. I would also encourage, in this great country of Australia, to seek representation of your market on your team. You can absolutely do that here. And just in conclusion, I believe it's an innovator's job to understand where our society is going and to do the work that will solve the problems of the future. It's not just business as usual, and that's what successful businesses do. I encourage you to come and say good day, link in with me, or follow me on Twitter. I could probably do with a few more followers. Thank you very much.